Good afternoon. I'm Dan DeRosa with 19 News, coming to you yet again from our digital desk to talk about the swatting incident that originally we thought was contained or just going to be about Rocky River. But then we started getting reports from our news partners all over the state that this was, in fact, a statewide swatting situation. If you don't know what swatting is, if you're not familiar with it, these are fake calls of violence that are put out either to schools or police departments. Presumably, most of the time they're put out towards schools. So that creates first responders having to do their job and what they're trained to do, mobilize, get to the school, protect the children. In cases you have SWAT teams called out. That was the case, in fact, today in Rocky River. Therefore, that's why it's called swatting. It is a time waster. It is a resource waster. And there doesn't seem to be an answer to stop these. They've been happening for about the last 2 to 3 years. There is a law in the state of Ohio passed in 2023 that elevates this to a 4th-degree felony. If you're caught making one of these swatting calls, you can also pay for all the time for the first responders and the equipment that had to show up. If somebody gets hurt during this, whether it's a first responder, on their way to the school or somebody evacuating a school, it elevates it in a felony. To maybe get a little bit better understanding as to why this keeps happening and who's doing this, I want to welcome in Professor Dan Flannery. He's with Case Western Reserve University. He is at the Begun Center for Violence Prevention and Research. Professor, thanks for spending some time with us.
Good afternoon.
Let's talk about this. Just let me get this right out. Why does this keep happening?
Well, certainly there are individuals that either have an issue with education in the system or with law enforcement in particular, and they're seeking to create fear and chaos and disrupt the normal response availability of first responders to deal with other incidents. So this is meant to be disruptive. It's meant to be costly. Sometimes there are individuals who are local who have an issue. This is perhaps the escalation of the old pull the fire alarm because you don't want to take an exam kind of thing. And sometimes we find that individuals who do this, particularly juveniles, don't understand the seriousness of what they're doing. In this particular case, if it's been more than just one school building or district, and it seems to have happened in multiple districts around the state simultaneously, there have been instances where this is being perpetrated by individuals not even in the local community or in this country. Sometimes these are perpetrated by individuals overseas, again, with the sole purpose to instill fear and create chaos and dominate the resources of our first responders.
Yeah, and I do want to just reiterate what we had heard earlier from the FBI. The FBI Cleveland office is aware of numerous swatting incidents across northern Ohio and is currently assisting local law enforcement. Swatting puts innocent people at risk, making false threats, drains law enforcement resources, and can cause significant distress or physical injury to first responders and others. Again, that statement put out in about the last 20 minutes by the Cleveland FBI office. Professor, when we start looking at this at more of a state level, this hit Toledo, it hit Cincinnati, it hit Columbus, it hit all the major cities in Ohio. And I know I kind of already asked what the goal is, but why make this sort of a statewide thing? What is it that you can't just disrupt one community, that you're reaching out trying to do this all over the state?
Part of it may be to just demonstrate your capacity to do this in more than one location. In other instances, systems have been hacked with a demand for sort of payment to get the system back in place. This is sort of a related example of I may do this in multiple big places to show you how I can take control of your systems and your response. And law enforcement's required to take these threats seriously. This is feeding into the fear that things can happen anywhere. And we've experienced that, unfortunately, with respect to schools. But there have been swatting incidents with homes or gamers that are trying to get at each other kind of thing. So not only is there a particular risk to responders on the scene, but you're responding and not knowing who the alleged perpetrators might be until you investigate. And there have been some instances where innocent victims in those locations have been hurt by first responders who has misinterpreted a person as an assailant or someone with a weapon in that response. So these are serious incidents, and I'm glad that we have felony charges related to these things. People need to understand this isn't a joke. This isn't a sort of a casual kind of thing to do, playing around. There are all kinds of potential outcomes in these incidents that are not, and none of them good, let alone the sort of fear and stress that you're instilling in a community, in teachers and students that are now on lockdown, waiting to find out whether the threat is real.
Let's talk about how easy or how difficult it is to catch somebody who's doing this, especially, I'm assuming, if it's somebody from overseas that's using a spoof phone number, using computers to do this. How easy is it to catch these individuals?
That's a better question for our federal law enforcement agencies, but it's much more difficult today than it used to be. If someone's sitting in the county library using the desktop in the library, then you can pretty easily trace that IP address and that location, or from a particular phone in a local community, if you have the cooperation of the cell phone companies. If this is being done with an alleged perpetrator who's overseas, that becomes much more difficult and requires collaboration among not only local and federal authorities, but international authorities. So, yeah, sometimes these perpetrators aren't ever identified in these kinds of incidents, which is also what contributes to the fact that they continue to occur.
That's really unfortunate. Professor Dan Flannery with Case Western Reserve University, the Begun Center for Violence Prevention and Research. Certainly appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, take care, sir. Really just wanted to take this the next step further, to have this conversation of why this keeps happening, who's doing this, who's behind it, and really just how hard it is to put those felony charges to whoever's doing it. It's much easier when it's, as you heard the professor say, maybe a student trying to get out of a test or some classwork or finals than it is when it's an overseas actor in this type of situation. We'll have a complete update on this and all of the day's news and First Alert weather when we start 3.5 hours of news and weather in just about 20 minutes on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have an excellent afternoon.